I was really loved and admire. P.H. Polk, filmmakers like Charles Burnett. There's a photographer, Jeannie Masumi Ash, who did a series on Defesky Island that really helped shape me. But yeah, I think I knew that I really wanted to kind of just embed myself in the everyday rhythms of this farm and the quiet and the mundane. That was important to me. I knew that this film wasn't going to be a didactic portrait of Black farmers. I knew that it was going to be a very quiet and elliptical film, and so I knew that we were going to really lean into kind of the nonlinear time space throughout this journey. And so we started with the older generations, like the Carly Williams and all these other people, and then we start to focus on kind of Willie Head Jr., who's a little bit younger, who's more of an activist, and his storyline's a little bit more different. He's more active. So a lot of times with the elders, I was on a tripod, just kind of being there with them. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it was a very kind of patient space for me, and I think that's kind of how I just started, or kind of with the film.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think you kind of touched on this, the question I would just kind of wanted to explore next. But I think this film, I mean, as you mentioned, it's not in any sense didactic. It's extremely meditative and poetic, but at the same time, there is a very strong political kind of message throughout. And so I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more about the kind of the two different impulses that kind of coexist in your film, and how you kind of navigate that kind of two. I mean, they're not necessarily separate, but they're of course connected. But how you kind of navigate the two different sort of, I guess, kind of spaces making this film.
Of course. I mean, I think with Willie Head Jr., who's the main participant in the film, like his storyline is a bit more, he's an activist, and so those political points are a lot more overt, and so I knew that it was important for me and my editor to kind of build a tapestry around that, and so to have those kind of more political storylines kind of unfold like later on during the story when we go to Washington, D.C., but it was really important for me to kind of get to know his story and to kind of understand like why he's doing this. It was really important for me not just kind of depict the plights and adversities of these Black farmers, but really to kind of show like the familial love and care and tenderness, and why they've been so adamant about protecting their land, because this is their home, this is a sanctuary, and this is their respite from the world. And it was important for me to really be able to document that too.
Thank you. Maybe I'll have just ask one last question, then open it to the audience. So you directed and produced and filmed and also recorded the sound of this film yourself. And I mean, can you share a little bit about potential challenges and also freedoms of wearing all these hats? And so I imagine that having all those hats and being there with a very, very small crew kind of created this kind of intimacy and the kind of the quietness and trust. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. I mean, one of the reasons too is because when you have limited funding and resources, you kind of wear many hats. But at the same time, that kind of allowed me the privilege to kind of really developing these kind of intimate relationships with these family members. Even right off the bat, Belle Williams, who we see the first person we see in the car, she was very open with me and very generous and kind. And I think because I was kind of, because they were at a state where they were tired, so I kind of was like this new person being there. So I think it made things a little bit more interesting for them, but they treated me like a granddaughter, and I think that that trust made things a lot more easier. In terms of the technical components, I think just having my camera and then having like sometimes a loud mic or a shotgun, it just made things a lot more flexible and malleable for me. I think you have to kind of be instinctive when you're by yourself. You can't really always question your decisions. And so there's a lot of mistakes you make along the way when you're making a film for so many years, and you're just learning as you go. And because my film it's not focused on necessarily like issues. There's a lot of the the quiet moments. you kind of don't know how it's going to fold until you get into the editing room. And so I think you just have to kind of embrace kind of these everyday situations that may occur or may not occur.
Yeah. I mean, like many kittens, appear just at a perfect time every single moment. So I'm happy to open it to the audience. Are there any questions? We have a roaming mic. Yeah, there's a hand in the front row, please.
Thanks. Thank you so much for this film. I have so many questions, but I'm going to be cheeky and just go with two. The first one was really about that cotton picking sequence. I found it really impactful, very moving. I wanted to hear a bit more about the process behind putting that together, because obviously there's quite a lot of layered weight that goes with something like that. And then a bit more about the editorial process. Obviously filming over so many years, how did you decide what to include and what to maybe not include, and were there any things that almost made the cut but then didn't in the end? Thank you.
Of course. And you're talking about the cotton sequence, right?
Yes.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, that sequence, of course, has a very layered weight. Anytime you film with cotton, it's fraught with so many things about the historical past, and so we knew that the sequence in some ways would be a haunting. And so that's kind of how we edited it, not only with visually, but with the sound. And so we wanted to kind of mix that brutality of the machinery, but also create a safe space where these are the family members. And so we wanted to kind of allow it to alleviate a little bit. And so with Rob's vocals that sound very angelic and spiritual, we wanted to be able to incorporate that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how we wanted to kind of try to kind of make that sequence feel. It's a very complicated moment, but and then yeah, what was your second question?
Editing process.
Yeah, my editing process. So we've accumulated a lot of footage. Like I said, even though my film wasn't issue based, I think when we started editing, especially with the elder members like the Contavia Williams, we knew that the car would be a motif throughout the film, and so we kind of put different kind of for us it was like quilt making, right? So we had like individual squares of quilt, and so what was repeated throughout, we knew that we're going to come back to this space in different ways. And so it was really finding the balancing those moments also with kind of the more linear storyline of Willie kind of, his fight with the USDA and getting subsidies and all that. And so it was just kind of a collaboration with my editor and I think she's very insightful and very keen, and I think we're also very experimental, there's a lot of long takes with the film, and so balancing all that and how that was gonna evolve over time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the audience? We have there's a hand on the second row, and then we'll come to you after.
Thank you for a really beautiful film. My question was around, so working with and sort of filming an older generation, how was that and how did that impact the sort of storytelling you wanted to do, and sort of working multi-generationally as well? So I love how it came out and how like you saw the different stories, you saw them move through them spaces, and just how you thought about it and how that came together.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's not a lot of films depicting like aging farmers, and for me, I knew that was really important for me to kind of focus on them, and also because they were at a very specific stage in their life where things were winding down and there was a lot of health challenges. So it's important for me to kind of acknowledge those, but also kind of their love for their land. And I think one of the main questions that's kind of percolating in the background is who's going to take over this land when they pass away. And so I knew that was going to be a theme throughout the film. So it was also critical for me to kind of really highlight, the younger generations, like Willie had with his children, why he wants to kind of build a house for, Amani and Ace. So we knew that there's always going to be like generations. We don't know if these kids are going to take over the land, but regardless, it's so important for him to have a place to kind of come back to or return to. And so I think that's kind of how, you know, I really wanted to kind of make this film, and yeah, thank you.
And then there was one hand in the middle.
Thank you. Thanks for a really interesting film. One thing I wanted to ask, I was struggling with the regional accents dialogue, and I've really, at the end, I wanted to listen to what the 89-year-old gentleman had to say, and I think I probably missed a lot of it. Did you think about, although they're speaking in English, did you think about subtitles for the film so we could actually understand and bypass the regional differences? And the second point is that he was struggling in terms of getting their checks from the government when they went to DC, and you know the guy from the Biden administration said to him, you know, just wait 9 months, which was ridiculous. Did he? And he said, well, you know, the white farmers sue the government, that's why they get their money first. Will he actually get his money in the end? And if so, did he have to wait the 9 months, or did they do it a bit quicker for him?
Yeah, he still had to wait a while to get the subsidies, but he did eventually get the money. But what's ironic about this scene is that there's some farmers, even in that vehicle, that passed away before they were able to get anything. And so that has been kind of a 30-year journey, a struggle. You know, these farmers have been fighting against the USDA for racial discrimination and all these different inequities that made it difficult for Black farmers to continue. And so that's why many Black farms have been foreclosed on. You know, they could accrue debt, and so there's been a substantial amount of land loss. But yeah, I mean, that's why, like, you know, the story continues. That's why we didn't really answer it, because, you know, there's so many, especially now when there's so many diversity programs that's being, you know, dismantled right now. And so there's a lot of issues that keep occurring. But yeah, your other question, we do have open captions for the film. So sometimes we show it, we just didn't show it this time, but yeah.
Yeah, I believe our next screening is with open caption. And I think BSL interpretation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Our next screening is going to be with the BSL.
Yes.
We have time for one last question. There's a hand in there. Mike?
Thank you. Really, really beautiful film. You started this film in 2015, and obviously it's 10 years later now, and as you said, the story is ongoing still. What prompted the film to be made and released at this point, rather than 5 years ago or in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. The main thing is it takes a long time to get your first feature off the ground. So that's kind of the lagging too. But I think, you know, I met Willie Head, I think 5 years or like 6 years after I started this project. And I found like his storyline really crucial and important for this film. And so I think I knew that I really wanted to expand the project, but I didn't know how. And I think, you know, just seeing his point of view and his relationship with his grandchildren, I think that wanted me to continue. And also I think in general, like, you know, the film, I think ended, you know, recently is just because I could continue to go, but you know, you have to stop at a specific point, and so that's basically why. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. I think. Do we have time for one very quick question? Yes. Sorry, I think there was a hand in the back. Sorry.
Thank you. It was a really beautiful film. I just wanted to ask, there were so many scenes in the film that felt very intimate for the people at the centre of the scenes, and I was just interested in how you, given that you were, you know, there with a camera, managed to create these scenes where people were able to be, I was going to say open, but more just sort of natural, with a camera there. What was your kind of process with that?
Of course. I mean, I think in the beginning I would always tell them to ignore me, pretend I'm not there, but that never happened. So they would break the fourth wall a lot. You can't really, like, you know, tell the elderly people what to do. And I think that dictated kind of the kind of collaboration and the openness with me. And I think because I was a young Black woman going there at the time, that also created a little bit of trust. And I think they wanted their stories to be told, and you know, they wanted their history to be highlighted, and I think that kind of allowed them to kind of be a bit more vulnerable with me during this time. But it wasn't this like, it wasn't a difficult, to be blunt, it wasn't really a difficult thing to do. Luckily for me, that wasn't the hardest thing. It was just, you know, going back and forth, and there's other kind of just the more kind of administrative things that was difficult, but never the forming the relationships between these participants, luckily.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing this film, or being so generous with sharing the process with us today.
Thank you for having me.